All right, welcome back to another Discovering God podcast. We're glad that you're joining us.
Well, Rip, last episode we talked about some big news for you. You have a book coming out. It is available on Amazon and elsewhere. But I'm curious, tell me a little bit about what is the story behind your book?
Yeah, thanks, man. It's the book is called Shattered: Surviving and Thriving After the Worst Pains of Life. And it's available on Amazon right now and Life Rich. You can find it elsewhere as well. Search the title and my name. The book is about our story and healing from the journey of losing a child. My hope is that not just that people will connect to our story, but that how I wrote the book, my hope is that they will actually connect to letting God touch the pains of their own life that they've been hiding away and not addressing.
Wow, that's powerful. Admittedly, though the book's been out, I haven't read it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I do, though, want to say that I've known you throughout this journey.
You were there
Yeah.
all the whole time.
And I think that the way God worked in, with, and through you in that season and throughout your journey has a lot to teach all of us. And so, though I haven't read the book, I highly recommend the book. And I encourage you to go on Amazon. Again, search for Rip Wahlberg. And then the title, Shattered.
Surviving and Thriving After the Worst Pains of Life.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, today we're on another topic.
Yeah, but hang on.
Yep. Uh-oh.
How do people also find where you're at online?
Yeah.
And what are you hoping to accomplish with with things you're doing?
That is a great question. You know, I'm in a season in my life where I'm, to use a topic that we talked about last week.
You're gonna go there.
Deconstructing, but I'm not deconstructing my faith, but I'm deconstructing my own expectations in life.
Okay.
Or my own sense of worth. I'm realizing that I can be so focused on, and this is something God's been revealing to me, I can be so focused on what's coming down the road, or where I think God's going to use or work in, with, and through me. I can be so focused on where I want to be and the contentment I want to feel that I end up missing on the present. And for the past year and a half, 1 Thessalonians 4:11 through 12 has been my key verse, right? To lead a quiet life. And as I reflect on my own struggles with contentment and fulfillment, I'm realizing in many ways that I think we as a society have become so consumer driven. We've become so driven by the need of stuff and programs. And it's not only redefined how we view ourselves and, how I'd said I'm distracted by what could be. It also has redefined our relationships with other people. Mm-hmm. Relationships are seen through a financial lens, like what am I going to get out of it, of being in a relationship with people? But it's also redefined our sacred spaces. And our sacred spaces are filled with things that are meant to feed us, and experiences and programs we are consuming. And I think we have lost the ability to be still and quiet, to sit contently with who God is in the season we're in. And I'm on a journey of discovering that. Mm-hmm. I believe that's going to be at the core of my doctoral studies I'm starting this January. And so as I look at what that means for our sacred spaces, our relationships, and for myself, I want to express that journey as it goes on. And so there's a blog host called Pathos. It's a bunch of faith bloggers. And there, if you would search for my name, Jeff McLean, or if you would look for Lead a Quiet Life, my blog will come up. And there's just a few blog posts up right now, but there's more to come as that journey continues.
That's awesome. Yeah. Look forward to seeing what develops there for you. Because I know you got a great heart, and I know you're not just you are a deep thinker, but you're a really good thinker. And I think there's a lot of value that people would receive by going and searching for you there and kind of connecting with you there.
Yeah.
So
it's journey together.
Yeah. So it sort of touches on what we want to talk about again today.
Ironically.
This idea of celebrity. We did that podcast number of weeks ago.
Yeah.
got some pretty good traction, and we just wanted to follow it up a little bit, but we wanted to try to take some time and unpack some passages that we feel speak in some way to what is going on um, within the church, and celebrity pastors, let's say, but celebrity speakers, this celebrity mindset, because it's kind of a two-way street that's dysfunctionally serving each other.
Yeah.
You've got famous people that can create a brand and become famous, but you also have the mindset within the church that, oh, well, this is a famous person, I'll listen to them.
Yeah.
you know and I don't know how we get away from that. I don't think that's the point of the discussion tonight, but what, I guess, so let's start with, what are you looking up?
Yeah, as you're talking, I just this Sunday we've been in this series going through First Thessalonians as I open myself to Second Thessalonians. But in and as you were talking about celebrity pastors, uh, I couldn't help but realize that so much of that is rooted in our own need to be valued. And Paul, when he's writing to the church in Thessalonica, as they're dealing with persecution, a polarization of society, they're dealing with plagues and various aspects of their society, he tells them, and I'm trying to remember where it was this week, but and I believe, here we go. He says in 19, for what is our hope, our joy, or the crown? And by the way, the word for crown there represents the garlands or the wreath that they would have worn in public games.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so he's saying, what is our crown that we will glory in the presence of our Lord when he comes? So when Jesus comes, what's the one thing that's going to be our wreath around our neck? And he says, it's you. Indeed, you are our glory and joy. And as I reflect on that, so much of church has been about branding, pastors about building a stage or a platform where others can hear you.
Mm-hmm.
Paul says, my platform, my stage is that you guys are winning. You know what I mean? You guys are doing things on your own and you're modeling for everyone else. That's the rest of the letter. But there's such a disconnect from what we see in the New Testament and what we see in church ministry today in the Western evangelical world. We see leaders investing in others for the sake of others, not for a sake of stage. And I think that the intent is good, right? They think if we can get a certain amount of celebrityism, people will hear the goodness of God, the good news of God. But there's so much else that comes along with a paradigm like that,
Mm-hmm.
that is broken, that hurts things. Paul's like, guys, the only thing I'm going to care about when I get there is that you guys succeeded. You were fruitful. And I love that as a paradigm as we enter this conversation to, this is what it means to follow Jesus, and then contrast that to where we're at today.
Yeah. I don't even know where to begin with some of that, but that there was a bunch of things rattling around in my head just of Paul saying, you bringing that up, and he's like, the only thing I'm really going to take pleasure in is,
you were the one church I didn't have to send a rebuke letter to.
Exactly. Yeah, that too.
But there are other verses that speak
mm-hmm.
to what a posture of a follower of Jesus looks like in this time. There are other verses that speak to, this is what a fruitful or a faithful ministry looks like. And again, it seems to cast a contrasting shadow on the world we're living in.
Well, for example, the who do you follow kind of thing, like the name, the celebrity name, and a lot of people will do that. I'm really tracking so and so forth. Anybody with the name recognition, it's kind of, when you're building your brand, you're building name recognition, and you can do all kinds of things with that. I do think in some way that it was present, not with technology, but it was present of the mindset is a human condition.
Yeah.
And here's why I'll bring that up. In 1 Corinthians 3:4, Paul talks about, some say I follow Paul,
Yeah.
and some say I follow Apollos.
Yeah.
And he's like, who cares?
Yeah.
I I planted the seed, Apollos watered it. Someone else is going to come along and harvest the fruit.
Yeah.
Who cares, right? But that's kind of my paraphrasing, of course. But I think that he's addressing the human condition that is similar throughout the ages, just expressed with different ways.
Yeah.
You know, we give an allegiance to someone, and if they're not that, then again, I found this in so many ways here, that having been a vineyard pastor, and eventually that kind of meant nothing.
Hmm.
Where it was, because there was new names on the billboards, there was
Yeah.
new names on the stage, and it was, oh, if you don't have their sort of stamp of approval, if you're not in their circles, then we don't really feel we need what you would have to offer.
And doesn't it feel like the world is growing? I just feel like we're growing more and more into that, even though we're saying, celebrities, and we're more critical of some of the lives they've lived, thankfully.
Hmm.
But we're still gravitated towards them. I mean, look at the NFL right now. Some of the biggest conversation is between, is Kelsey dating
Taylor
Taylor
Swift?
Swift or
I
not,
can't even
right?
believe I know that.
Yeah.
I shouldn't know that.
Some of the, I'm amazed on social media, and social media, by the way, we were clicking follow on everybody. Uh, how many people are lamenting when a celebrity dies? It's like we're talking about them like they were our best friend.
Mm.
The only person that I've been really upset to lose over the past few years in the celebrity wise was Jimmy Buffett, but we won't talk about that. The reality is, though, if people are drawn to those who are out front, who are loud, who are bold, who seem to speak about something that they can resonate with, and they become a priority in our lives
Hmm.
in really unhealthy ways. And I continue to see that as we choose our news sources, our pastors, our theological circles, so much so that when you even mention somebody from the other side,
Hmm.
or that may be a paradigm outside of yours, it's almost like you're demonized for referencing that. There is so many times that I have to preface, I'm about to quote somebody, and I don't like everything about this guy. But even broken clocks tell time right twice,
Right.
or whatever the saying is, and we're in that place where celebrity really has been something we're gravitating towards more and more, despite there are more church leaders, there are more political leaders, there are more celebrities falling with things in their closet than ever before.
Yeah. It hasn't stopped. Like,
Yeah.
for some naive reason, I thought that would have, the celebrity pastor type falling would have stopped with Ted Haggard and
Yeah. You would think those are the Jay Bakers, the Ted Haggards,
yep,
yeah.
all those. I thought it would have stopped somewhere
At
in there with,
least
like,
went downhill some.
it's sort of slowed and ebbed for a little bit, but there are people today that are, let's say, they rise to prominence, they get mentioned on Fox News,
Yeah.
and hear this prophetic guy on Fox News, and then all of a sudden, shoo, they're like, so I think the fall from grace can become a little more obscure somehow.
I also see it in the way that every forethinker, I don't know what we want to call them, every thought leader, that's what they call them today, right?
Thought leaders.
Thought leader. Every thought leader has some sort of program or training or webinar series that if you would only buy in for $300 this year, they will teach you how to walk in this new skill or a new way of thinking. Yeah, and it just blows my mind. But that only works in a celebrity culture because you're drawn to a person's personality. We don't know if they're really good at what they're doing, but their
Hmm.
name is enough to convince us to throw over $300, sometimes more.
Right.
And it's almost like those certificates for some have replaced the importance of academic work, and we're drawn to thinking like somebody else.
I could go really hard onto that one, and I'm gonna really try not to.
I didn't mean to set you up there.
Well, yeah, you would set me up, and I'm gonna try just not go there much. But yes, it is at times a substitute and not a really great one
Yeah.
for academic substance, scholarly substance. Um, I've been around enough at a time in my past, in a few years ago, where the books that are written and all the stuff, the product has to move,
Yeah.
and so you have a time at the conferences and so forth of promotion, and whether the author is doing it, who's the speaker on the stage, or someone else is
The
doing it,
moderator's doing
the
it for him.
moderator's
Yeah.
doing it for him, right? They give the loss leaders, but then it's tagged with things like this book, this teaching changed my life. And it just keeps kind of building up the image.
And when you go to conferences where they say the same moderator says that about a different author's book every year, you start to go, wow, this person's been through more life transformations in a 2-year period than I've ever been in 41 years of
Yeah,
living.
yeah. So it's not that it doesn't have an impact, I would say, but it seems to lack a substantive value.
Yeah.
Where we use the word hype at times, and I think it has a counter. What is that? A diminishing returns.
I think there's a safety net in celebrityism that we trust. Like, in the church, I often ask myself, why are we drawn to certain personalities? Why do those personalities seem to have favor or the ability to open any door? Why is there certain people that are at the top and others who are just as fruitful in other ways or faithful don't seem to ever get there? And at the end of the day, I think, and I could be completely wrong, but I think that we're so insecure in who we are and our faith that we need people that we trust to be our security net.
Like stable or consistent.
Which is why so many people then deconstruct when those leaders fall.
Right.
Because it's like, oh no, I had everything invested in. Like, we don't know ourselves for ourselves. And so then we need churches that have these leaders that, they'll just give it to us spoon fed.
Yeah. So I brought up 1 Corinthians 3:4.
Yeah, that was a perfect passage.
You were hitting one in Thessalonians. Do you have any other passages that you see speak to this?
Yeah. Jesus constantly, in different ways, but most clearly in Matthew 16:24, says, whoever wants to be my disciple, my lifelong follower, they must deny themselves. To me, when you hear that word deny themselves, it's not just a coming to the end of your sins or your wrongs. He's not talking about this confessional state of our salvation moment, our salvific moment, right? He's literally saying the yearnings, the expectations, the dreams, who you have been up to this point, who you want to be, even who you want to be from me, must be denied.
Yeah.
And you must take up your cross, right? It's a sign of death, that it's surrendered to the Lord, and follow me. And sometimes God does give us back some of those things we surrendered to him to live into. But to truly follow him, I think, and this is a term that I've been using more and more, is a life of downward mobility. Downward mobility. I hope I didn't mention this in the last time we talked about this, but I was at a funeral home, and they were having a training for pastors on how to walk with people faithfully that are in deep mourning and grief. And the guy opened up his speech with a kind of a funny thing, and he said, do you ever notice the people in your church that leave not because they need more programs or anything, end up still going to churches that have more programs? He said they always have an upward mobility. And then he also said, isn't it funny, a pastor will spend 10 years in a church and then feel a call to go somewhere else. And he said, but they never model downward mobility. They always go into a
They're always
bigger,
leveraging up.
yeah, and to me that works against what we see Jesus saying. To me, the denying aspect is a downward mobility. It is
Hmm.
a choosing to be less and less, which also is in the scriptures.
Yeah, I, that's a very interesting, um, that's just interesting insight with that passage, and I don't disagree that it's a place and a point where it can be applied,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Regardless of the author's meaning, I would agree we can apply that in that way. Um, as you were saying, I often think of like the churches that I grew up in. It was sort of the expected upward mobility. For example, the youth pastor either takes on or leaves to take on a
Yeah.
senior role somewhere. And it's just that their ministry versus career, even.
I think we're measured by what we can give away. And that's why I'm on this journey that I mentioned earlier. And you know that I went from a church that was small, 150 people, but now I'm in a church that's much smaller, like a 26 person church. And there's nothing appealing about that in the world standards.
By the way, it is a good church.
It is, oh yeah.
I'm kind of saying, like, when you say there's nothing appealing about that, I want to make sure that you're
by
not,
the world
it's
standards.
clear you're not
Yeah.
saying, I wish I wasn't there.
River
You're
Corner
doing a really
is
terrific
one
job.
of the most
And terrific
welcoming
people.
church that I've ever been in. They are solid followers of Jesus. Nothing against them. I mean, by the world standards, where bigger is
Right.
better.
Right.
And I look at that and I just think, what would happen if we all chose to walk that path?
I did a paper for a class.
Okay.
This relates. I did a paper for a class, and it was pick one of the 7 core commitments of the seminary and write a short paper, a short essay on it, reflection paper. So I did, and the one of the professors gave a wonderful discussion, 2.5 minute video on remember it's not about you. And he used the word serve, and I mean, it had all my buttons and wheels turning about how things I may have done well and some things I may have had some unhealthy inside,
We all make mistakes.
ambitions, let's say, and whatever. And it was such a good calibrating reminder that I wrote a short paper on serving and just like remembering would you give your life? Are we giving our life for the people we're serving?
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that there's nothing good in a big church or anything. It's just, I wonder if it's easier to say, oh yeah, I'm giving my life when I'm increasing in my status within a certain congregation versus what you're describing.
We translate that as the favor of God, or that God's hand is on us,
yes,
right?
we
And
do.
where He's using us. And I mean, there are scriptures stories in which God elevates a person for a season, but there's a whole bunch of other ones, such as King Saul, where when somebody gets to that point, it literally is the undoing of who they are.
Yeah.
And God's like, that's not what I wanted from you in the first place. Most of the leadership pipelines of the scriptures are downward mobility.
The strokes and attaboys from preaching are sometimes a dangerous mistress.
That's true.
Right? So here's one
Wow.
that I've got.
All right.
Sorry, do you want to
No, I was just
unpack that, or
no, it was a good line.
it's just in line with what you were describing,
Yeah.
I think, So John 3:30.
Yeah.
Here's where John the Baptist's disciples are coming to him and saying, "Hey, Master, the guy that you baptized down the way a couple weeks ago?" They're like, "He's drawing bigger crowds than
Yeah.
you." This is John 30, and this is John 3:30.
Yeah.
John the Baptist, and the Bible describes him as the greatest of all the prophets
Yeah.
and the forerunner of Jesus. And he responds to them saying, I must decrease so that he
Yeah.
increases.
Yeah.
And he's basically saying, guys, it's okay. And by the way, didn't he send one or two of his,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Two,
James, one
yeah.
or two of his own
Two of his
disciples, wanted to
disciples go to
follow
follow Jesus.
Jesus? And John's like, sure, go chase him down. Right?
Yeah.
He was willing to give up his best. He was willing to become less visible so that the person who it was all about in the first place.
And those weren't just words. He literally pulls out of the scene and takes a pretty sharp turn at that point
Pretty
in the story
much.
to his own death, right?
Yes, yes. And yet in today's world, we're about building our brand, increasing our visibility. Oh, there's a big conference.
If I can get on the
If I
news,
can get on the stage of that conference and so forth. But that's all goes on behind the scenes from time to time.
yeah.
And yet it's portrayed as, well, the hand of God is on me. And I just find it sometimes conflicting.
You know, I even love when Jesus talks about John the Baptist. So John says, look, I got to become less so he can become greater, right? And then Jesus says, as you said, there's no other prophets born of women that were greater than John. But he basically then says, but you can be that too. Jesus builds a platform and gives his own ministry away. At the end of his ministry, he moves from saying, I no longer call you disciples or servants. I call you friend, right? Like there's this we're on the mission, on the journey together in equal ways. And he fully passes on the baton and even says, now go equipped by the Holy Spirit so you can do greater things. In other words, the platform has been built for you. Now you can take it to the next level.
Yeah.
And it's the opposite of what we're seeing.
Because I don't, honestly, the celebrity platform, I shouldn't say platform, but the celebrity mindset, however it happens in the church, ultimately draws away from discipleship and being a disciple. It portrays as trying to build followers of Jesus, but it really is cultivating a brand.
Yeah.
And like John the Baptist, as we're saying, said the exact opposite of increasing visibility. And Jesus was saying, if you're going to follow me, it's about taking up your cross. Yeah. You were touching on this.
A self-sacrificial life, yeah.
And what happened when Jesus said those hard things too? A lot of his followers left.
Yeah. Not
to say, they were all shallow. It's just the point is that there's a difference between these two things. One is I'm sure you've seen this, but I think I haven't seen it much now. I wonder if it's because people kind of got the hint. But I used to see things like the traveling people, and then they'd be sharing, here's the meal I just had. Or here's the resort we're staying in. #suffering for Jesus.
Yeah.
Ha, 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 ha. Like,
I still see it, unfortunately.
Do you still see it?
I do. Maybe not in a larger evangelical church. I still see it among, especially my Pentecostal brothers and sisters, where there's some sort of traveling speaker, evangelist, apostle, prophet that comes in, and there's an expectation of treatment.
Mm-hmm.
But the church doesn't define that; the people define it.
Right.
I mean, the person that's speaking defines it, which I just find really self-centering.
Yeah.
I'll take a whole bowl of green M&Ms, please, right?
Oh yeah,
and,
yeah. Fiji water.
And they
only
then speak of those things as if they're their blessings. And so I am still seeing it. And guys, there is honor, and honor is to be given. In fact, in 50 AD, we have a historic teaching of the apostles. It's literally called the teaching, and in it they talk about how to receive a traveling speaker or a prophet to dash. And the end of the day, though, it didn't put people out, but I see people still putting people out for their own ministry, and that's scary. And if you're celebrating wealth and value while people are suffering in around you. I know you're trying to say, like, this is where you could be, but it doesn't work. I work for a homeless shelter, and the guests tell me that there used to be a chapel partner who would dress up with rings and bling and
Mm.
come in the nicest of clothes and say, if you follow, this was the hidden message. If you follow Jesus, he will bring you to a place of fame and notoriety, and this is who you'll be. And they literally said to me, like, if that's where Jesus wants me to be, I don't even want anything to do with it. I mean, so
Yeah.
they saw through it so quickly. But I do think some of the celebrity culture is that it's this belief that prosperity equals godliness.
Hmm. Yeah. And that is, there's nowhere in the Bible, and there's nowhere in Jesus' teaching or anything that ultimately the Bible should be used as a self-help book,
Right.
right? And a your best life now kind of thing. The final for me, and then you can close it out.
Yeah.
But the final passage that I see, I just think it's a really powerful exhortation from Paul in 1 Thessalonians 4:11 and 12. It really is the basis of you, I'd say, of your where you're going with your blogs, right? Is Paul says, make it your ambition to
Yeah.
lead a quiet life.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like this quote from Keener. He says, Paul's asking his readers to be inconspicuous, not monastic. So he's making a distinction there. But he's basically saying, Keener's just pointing out, Paul's not saying be totally obscure.
Right.
Just don't always have to thrust yourself into the limelight or the milieu or the stage or the political angst and so forth. Like, it's okay to be inconspicuous. So,
Yeah.
and I, that is one that always resonates and I'm reminded of continually.
There's a First Thessalonians starts by Paul rewarding them for the way that they've lived faithful. But there's a notable shift in the second chapter where he begins to use language that implies there still needs to be new ground being gained for the kingdom. So even though we are living quietly and simple, we already gained new ground, but the way that we do that looks so much different than the world's standards. And the more I've been spending time in that letter from Paul, the more I realize how much that context reflects our world. They were a world of that city was along the Roman world, the Via Egnatia. That city had a seaport that kept them connected everywhere. They were a major stop between East and West trade. The world around them was full of the arts. They had a synagogue. They even had their own mini amphitheater. They had theaters. And the culture was abundant. But from the start, the followers of Jesus and the way that they chose to live was so countercultural that it upset both the Jews, and we see that in Acts 17 with Jason, but it also upset the leaders of the time. Even though Rome was very accepting, this is not an occupied city. The Thessalonian area was a free city. They did not have a Roman occupation, but they were easily defined by their wealth and abundance. And it's to that congregation, to those house churches, that Paul writes that 1 Thessalonians 4:11-12, right? Make it your ambition to live a quiet life. So don't fight back. The way to countercultural, to live in a time where you're being pushed down and shut up, is actually just to live with greater integrity and with greater humility, because it's going to, I mean, Jesus says this, right? Love your enemies. It'll put hot coals on their head. And I think that's exactly what Paul is getting at here in this is, guys, I need you to gain ground for the kingdom. And Jesus is at work in you, with you, through you. You will be gaining new ground. But the way to do it isn't by competing with the world's standards.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good point to end on. So,
sounds great.
Folks, we hope you've enjoyed this, and thanks for being with us. We hope that you'll go and look at some of the passages we've talked about today and come face to face with God by coming face to face with His Word. If you've liked the podcast, give us a like, hit the subscribe button, and help us get the word out. Have a great day.